Yes, so this meeting is being recorded, and we're going to be sharing that recording out with folks after the session. So welcome again. You are joining the first of a two-part series on facilitating collaboration. So my name is Diana Toledo. I work with River Network, and we are one of the two organizations that coordinate the Urban Waters Learning Network, which is the entity that's hosting today's session. So River Network, alongside Groundwork USA, coordinate the Urban Waters Learning Network. And this session is coming out of discussions across members of that network about the training priorities for groups that make up the network, in particular federal partnership locations. So we are super happy to come to you with this offering of this two-part series that we hope you find valuable to your work. And so if you want to go to the next slide, if you're not familiar with the Urban Waters Learning Network, we are a peer-to-peer network of organizations and leaders who really are working on urban watersheds on both conservation, restoration, and revitalization, not just of the waterways, but of the communities near them. So I'll drop a couple of links into the chat box here shortly, so that you can become familiar with the work that we are doing if you're not already, and if you're interested to join our Mobilize online platform, so you can communicate with other groups around the country. And there are about 150, 170 entities, about 500 individuals that are member of that learning network. So would love to have you join us. So without further ado, so my name is Diana Toledo. I am joined here by my colleague at River Network, Brenna Goggin, who you've been hearing a lot from with all the nudges and the reminders. She's been doing amazing work getting everybody here today. And we are bringing the expertise of Diane Russell to lead these sessions. And so Diane Russell, if you are unfamiliar with the Institute for Conservation Leadership, it is an excellent group based out of the Washington, D.C. area. Diane brings, boy, over 30 years, maybe close to 40 years of
it's getting up there, yeah.
Up there of experience working with community organizations, and really a lot of organizations, coalitions, and leaders across the environmental and the conservation movement around the country. And so Institute for Conservation Leadership has been around, I don't know, they're some of my mentors, and I've been in this work for 25 years, really supporting leaders, organizations, and coalitions to do their work effectively. And so they have touched the work and the lives of many, many folks across the movement. And so we are super excited to have her here today to kind of lead us through this two-part series. So welcome, Diane. Thank you for joining, and I'm turning it back to you.
Thanks so much, Diana. I am absolutely delighted to be with you all. And the only thing I regret is that I don't have a chance to talk to each of you and learn about the work that you're doing on the ground. But through this session, we hope to really create a learning community over these two 90-minute sessions. And if you had a chance to look at the intro video, you know that we're going to be focusing today on collaborative tensions and working virtually, followed by another session in 2 weeks. And I'll warn you right now, we want you to be thinking now, right now, about what you're going to do differently. What's going to be your plan coming out of these two sessions? So start thinking about that. Today, we're going to focus on your collaborative leadership. Leadership always starts with each of us as individuals. We have to be managing ourselves and showing up in the best way possible, bringing our strengths, but also our growing edges. And we're going to be talking about those today so that we're self-aware and stepping into our work in that way. We're also going to be giving you what I like to think of as a pair of glasses to put on to look at your collaboratives through three different lenses, three different kinds of lenses that might help you adjust your leadership with your collaborative. It seems that we're going to be virtual for a while, even when we also are in person. And so we're going to cover the 6 tips for productive virtual meetings. Most of these tips translate to in-person meetings, but they are really focused on this world that we live in and the flat screen life. And then we're also going to be focusing on something that seems to be core based on what you've shared so far. This, how do we get folks to engage and how do we keep our work productive? So hopefully you've all had a chance to watch the video and be prepared, but if you aren't, we're going to drop a worksheet right now that is a public worksheet that asks each of you to reflect on what are my strengths, like what am I really strong at? And we need to focus on that because that's who we are and that's what we bring. And also ask you to identify your growing edges. And so we are going to put you right to work in this session. We're going to break you into pairs so that you can talk with one other leader here on the platform. And we'd like you to just talk through with each other who you are, of course, do that introduction and where you are and who you're working with. But then do that quickly and then be able to share your strengths as a collaborative leader. So the thing that I would encourage is one person introduces themselves, the other person introduces. Then another person shares their strengths and the other person shares their strengths, and then you do growing edges. This is a little facilitation trick that keeps things level, keeps things evenly participating. You can do this in any small group as a way to help support that kind of engagement that you want, so no one is like just kind of gets out of the box and starts dominating. Maybe they didn't want to dominate, but they just get on a roll. So I think if we're ready, Brenna, we're going to put you in pairs for about 10 minutes to just have a conversation with another leader here and get to know someone. And when we come back, we'll just look at and scan that worksheet as a tool that you might be able to use for networking. All right, are we good to go? All right, welcome back, everyone. I always like to see you all when you come back because generally people are smiling. It's a good thing to be able to connect with folks and just have that kind of time to chat. And I do want to thank you all for preparing ahead of time. If you haven't had a chance, it's not too late to also drop your strengths and your growing edges into the chart. It was super helpful for me to be able to see this ahead of time. And there are two things I want to say about some of the methodologies that we're using. One is STEAL. This concept of doing a recording before you get to the session that people watch is an excellent way to deliver content and save time for other things during the meeting, as well as using Google Sheets and having people prepare so that they're thinking as a group or thinking as an individual ahead of time. So feel free to share. And I also would encourage you to kind of go back and see. The thing that I really appreciated about this is you're not alone. And especially on the growing edges, it seems like the pieces that we've chosen to work on are right on target. So thank you for preparing. And pay attention to your strengths. You probably ended up talking more about your growing edges, but I really want to encourage you to pay attention to your strengths and then use other people's strengths as you observe folks in your collaborative. All right, we're going to shift right into a piece that I love. I introduced it at the top as a way to kind of put on a pair of glasses to look at your collaboration in a different way. And at the Institute for Conservation Leadership, we end up thinking a lot about continuum because in any social group, there are going to be tensions that are just there. You can't make them go away. It's just something that we all have to work with as a group and that you as leaders need to work with. And so the continua that we're going to talk about are these three. And I'm going to very quickly illustrate them. And then we're going to put you to work actually illustrating them out of your own experience. And I'll step you through how we're going to do that. So the first tension that we observe in collaborations and like to pay attention to is exactly what many of you came to this session, these sessions for, which is, are people engaged? And the other side of that continua is disengagement. And so paying attention not only to the whole group, like how much are people leaning in, how much are people volunteering, et cetera, is good, and paying attention to individuals in your collaboration and how much they're leaning in or how much they're not is also really important. Many of you in the things that you want to do or lean in, you know, your growing edges want to be able to do work that's actionable. I don't actually like that word, but we use it a lot. I use it a lot. But we want to be doing things so that we as a group feel like we've got something here. We're making progress. We're doing things. And even if it's small steps, that actually is a very helpful thing for groups to have progress and have momentum moving forward. It's also sometimes good, though, to be in the shoals if you were sailing, to be in the quiet waters and to kind of get to a quiet place or a stalemate where things aren't moving. And often in those moments, you can pull back and think about why. Like, is this just natural? Maybe. Or is there something we need to try to do differently that would help us move along? The third one is, how much are we actually cooperating and using the gifts and talents and the skills and the resources in the group in a cooperative way, in a shared way? And how much are we perhaps in a stance of competition? We live in a society where competition is the dominant. The either or is the dominant. It's either you or it's me. Like either I'm going to get credit or you're going to get credit. And so that competition thing comes up. It's part of the fabric of our world. And so sometimes using it. I know I was part of a collaborative where there was a little bit of a competition of, okay, that person stepped up. Maybe I need to step up. So it's not always a bad thing. It's not an either or. It's like just paying attention to where things are at and how you can use them. So those are three tensions, three concepts, and we're going to spend more time with them, but we're going to do that in breakouts. We're going to go into smaller groups, in part so that we can use a tool that we have found incredibly helpful and free to use online. It's called Jamboard. This is part of the Google suite. You have to go to the Google tools and go way down at the bottom, but it's a fantastic tool. It's pretty intuitive, but in any group I work with, I always take the time to explain it because there's going to be someone who hasn't used Jamboard. So this is Jamboard Live. You can go to different pages, and we're going to cover all three of those continua together. And what we're going to ask you to do is to just brainstorm signs of examples in your collaborative that you're part of. It could be any collaboration that you've ever been part of. But we just want to, like, tangibly, what does engagement look like? And tangibly, what does it look like when people are disengaged? So how are we going to get that brainstormed up there? We're going to use the handy dandy sticky note here. It will pop up. I like to point out you got 5 colors to use. That's fun. And you're going to put your idea down, and then you're going to hit save. And the cool thing about Jamboard is it usually pulls it up to the top, and then you can move it around just by grabbing it. The other thing I like to show people is if you get a lot of great ideas up there, you can make your sticky notes big or small. So for now, that's all I'm going to teach you about Jamboard, but there are lots of different ways to use it. And what we're going to do, because we're up to 64 folks right now, one word to the wise, if you use Jamboard, I don't use it with groups over 25 because it gets sticky and it's hard to use. So in part, we're going to use it in 3 breakouts right now, both so that there can be more dialogue among 20 of you, as well as so that Jamboard functions better. So I think I like the other cool thing about Jamboard is we will download all of the Jamboards in PDF form from each of the 3 groups and share them with you. So you can have those as tools and continue to kind of think about things, how you're similar to and how you're different from. As well as what are the antidotes if you need to move people a little bit on those scales. All right. We are going to shift gears and move into one of the things that we have found really helpful for the last 2 years. But I don't know that we can actually do it enough, because I feel like with meeting in a virtual setting, we have to kind of keep reinventing ourselves, especially with groups that are ongoing and are going to continue to meet. And then some of the challenge in the next year, I think, is going to be translating these to hybrid environments where some folks are in person and some folks are not. So the 6 tips for productive meetings, I'm just going to roll through these super fast, and we're going to have you process it in a small group. I'm actually going to time myself because we're running behind just a bit. But the first thing is something that we demonstrated in this meeting and that we try to do in almost every meeting, which is you don't have the sandwiches and the food of an in-person meeting. So what can you creatively do to help people make connections? And I would even say to have fun. I did something crazy last week where I had people run and get what your hat and scarf look like and come back after the break with that. Openers are other ways. Getting right into the work by having people do what we did with this and talk in breakout groups is also another way to do it. I sometimes do it before we get to anything about the agenda or what we're going to be doing, because how you start the meeting is how the meeting's going to roll. If you start with people talking at folks for more than 5 or 10 minutes, you create a pattern for the whole group to be in listening and just, you know, kind of hanging out mode. If you move them right away into creative connections, that is a really helpful way to open well and to kind of create a space that is literally engaging them. Opening well has a lot of different pieces. I think we as humans need to know where we're going, what we're going to be doing, but we also need that kind of connection with the group. And again, I would just encourage you to be as creative as possible in the virtual space to do that. Opening well is important. There's work that you do in between. And then maybe most missed is closing well. Closing well, when I'm designing meetings now, I often will block out the period of time that I think I need to bring things to a close. It depends on the kind of activity. But I will like design the opening, design the closing, and then design the middle, and then protect that space for the closing. Because if you end the meeting with everybody rushing out, you may not get the assignments down. You may not, you can lose momentum just by not closing a meeting well. And you can sometimes create more work for yourself too, because you have to go back and do it. One of the crazy things you can do with closing well, we're going to spend a little bit more time on closing well at the second session, is make sure you schedule the next meeting. That sounds goofy, but like try to avoid doodle at all costs. That's one of my mantras. You are seeing this in action when we do workshops or meetings. We really try to limit presentation of content to a 5 to 8 minute chunk, and then allow people to digest it somehow. This is a principle of adult learning. If we don't digest it and compare it with our experience or have a chance to talk about it or have a chance to write about it or do something, poof, it's gone. I will say getting speakers or people to be ready to deliver content in 5 to 8 minute chunks is a lot of work, and people will resist. I'm a speaker and you want me to do it in 8 minutes? Yeah, I do. Because I want your stuff to stick and I want people to have a chance to digest it. So you're not going to talk for 20 minutes, you're going to talk for 8, and then people are going to digest stuff. Build in more breaks than you think you need, and also doing some movement. I see your hand, Jared. I'm going to wait, or John, I'm sorry, John Herod. I'm going to wait just for a second, unless it's a quickie. Do you want to pop in with a quickie?
I think he's okay with waiting, Diane.
Okay, great. So build in more breaks than you think you need and get people to actually move. Again, like flat screen life as we are here, like do a little bit of an exercise, literally have people stand up, have them stretch. Like it changes the dynamic just like that. We called a 5-minute break and had them go get hats and scarves, like I said. It was great. People came back really energized for the second half. It was really helpful. We encourage you to use technology strategically and inclusively. We're going to be demonstrating this tool, which is Jamboard. We're going to do this tool next. This is called Mentimeter. That is a fabulous way to poll the group, but also get input. This is another tool called Padlet. The thing is, often it's tempting to say, I've got this tool, I'm going to use it. But it's more important to think about what am I trying to do and what tool will help me do that. And then some tools, as we talked about with Jamboard, work great with a certain size group. But if it goes over that, then you have to kind of creatively work in a different way. So really think about what you want to get done and then what is the best tool to be able to use. And then finally, like we've all had it happen, you really need to spend the time with online meetings to prep, rehearse, and do your tech checks. But this is just a corollary to in-person meetings that are done really well too. You need to know what the space is like. How are you going to set it up? What are the audio visuals going to be in the in-person meeting? And then, like, let's just say we're moving to hybrid. How do you marry those two in a way that can be seamless for people who aren't in person and for people who are? So let's go to John real quick, and I'm going to put up the 6 all together here.
Yeah, my question is about the digesting after this 5 to 8 minutes. I usually think of digesting as allowing people just to sit and think and mull over it. But I'm wondering if that is the digesting you're thinking of, or is it more like everyone jump into a Padlet and create something? Or when you say digest, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I literally mean take it in, work with it somehow, and let it get into the system. So in adult learning theory, we talk about publishing as the way for the learning to really stick. So if I hear something, I'm going to remember 30%. If I hear it and see it, I'll remember 50%. If I say it or write it, I'm going to remember 90%. And so some of it is concepts or even the timeline that the group has had together. Like, that's a very important thing for people to be able to continue to work with. I find a lot of progress in groups happen when you're also thinking like an educator, as well as what does the group dynamic need to be like for the group to digest it collectively and the group to be ready to move on, which is what we're going to talk about in session 2. We're going to talk about decision making and reaching consensus. So for time's sake, I'm going to take us into the 6 tips. And in just a second, I'm going to drop these in chat so that you have them. And we're going to now go into breakout groups of about 4 people each. You're going to have a chance for 20 minutes to literally digest and think about those 6 tips that we just shared. I'm going to drop them in chat now so that you have them at the ready. And you can reference them during the discussion. But basically, I'm asking you which of these, if you tried it, and that's an important term in collaboration, an experiment. Let's just try this and see what happens. I often tell people to humor me. I'm just going to, like, just go with me. I'm going to try those crazy things. So which of these might you want to try to help your collaboration in the next little bit? So Brenna, are we good to go in terms of breakouts?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm 14 minutes. And did you want to decrease that at all because of our timeline?
No, you're right. 14 minutes. I forgot to change that slide. And yes, that's fine.
Okay.
We'll make up the time. And you learned a page from. You're like, I want to do what they did. That was a really good insight. I want to do that. Okay, cool. So I made a call when Brenna asked if we should like have more time in plenary or in small group. I am always going to err on small group because of the peer learning and happening that happens. But I would like to just gather up a little bit about what you talked about and kind of understand from your perspective which of those 6 tips landed well. So we're going to use a tool. I'm also going to demonstrate a tool called Mentimeter. You can get to Mentimeter 3 different ways. You can go to a browser, and when you get there, you have to type in this number. This is my favorite. You can point your phone at the QR code on the screen and then use your phone to run Mentimeter, which I like in particular because then I can be doing it here while also watching things on the screen as they come in. And with Mentimeter, we're actually going to do 3 different questions in the last 15 minutes here. So we'll have a chance to see how it works. So hopefully everybody's there.
Diane, we have a hand raised.
Yes. Gianna? Sorry if I pronounced your
Sorry,
name
that
wrong.
was left over from
Okay,
here.
great. All right, so I'm going to switch over now live to the Mentimeter, and you all are already there. And this is a chance to see things as they come in, which one of the 6 tips landed most well or you think will best support your collaboration moving forward. We have votes for all of them. It definitely looks like both the creating connections early and the opening well and closing well is trending highest. Using technology strategically and limiting presentations would be the next ones after that. So I'm going to switch questions really quickly. I'm going to just give you 1 minute because I'm curious what you picked up from your peers. So again, in Mentimeter, just add in what were your new ideas that you gained from having that conversation and the breakout. That's a nice one. Set the tone. These are great. Interesting. Finding ways to make it easy for people to participate. The music is a cool idea. It does set a different flavor and tone. Icebreakers and opening. Scheduling things using tools like Calendly. This is great. Using a short question. Cool. You have to do the prep work if you're using tools. That's the only thing I'll say is I swear I work harder for virtual meetings in the prep than I did for in-person meetings. That is so right on. And it pays off, right? You can make it work, but you have to actually plan to do that prep. And it often helps to have multiple people in on it. This is terrific. I'm going to try that one, asking folks to turn off their cameras. All right, good. We'll collect those and hand them back to you as well. But I do want to just spend maybe 5 minutes real quick on a final set of thoughts here. Uh-oh. What's going on? Huh. Wow.
You're all right, Diane?
Yeah, so it looks like my internet's going out. I don't know if I'm frozen or if I'm still live.
I do not see you any longer. Would you like me to bring up your slides?
I think I'm back and
Yeah.
I have my slides up again. Even with the best prep, these things happen. We had redundancies in place just in case. And one of the things I'll point out is I'm on my phone and synchronized with my video. And that's why I could stay in contact with Brenna while I was out in La La Land. So I'm going to leave you with some final thoughts here about facilitating collaboration. Meetings are really key, but they are not the only thing. And in order to use each meeting well, we actually have to think about what I like to think of as the arc or the progression of the work that the group needs to do. One very easy way to do that is to think about what do I need to do before the meeting? And I plan that in order to be able to do this at the meeting. And then we'll land things at the meeting in such a way that there's usually things that need to happen then after the meeting. But actually like playing that out and thinking about it in a whole calendar and at different layers in the collaboration is one of the ways you can get things going. Now, one of the things I'll point out here is in this collaboration, the strategic working group is kind of like the leadership hub, and they were trying to pull in new stakeholders, and they needed to stay connected with the wider network. And by thinking about it all together, it allowed the group to then be able to plan their work as leaders in order to stay connected and pulling in and creating engagement with the wider network. That's definitely one of the themes in ICL's work is you need some things to happen in the full group, but a lot of things and progress and momentum often happens when a smaller group can hold the work and bring it back to the larger group. I see a lot of heads nodding on that one. And you can only use smaller groups when there's enough trust in the group that the full group is willing and able to let a smaller group do it and bring it back. If there's not enough trust, a smaller group will bring it and it will die. Like people will take it apart. And I see again, a lot of heads nodding. But just to remind, you know, that's why trust and relationship and all of those pieces are so critical. This is just another way to see it. I often will use Jamboard as a way to see things in a drafty way and a creative way about how to engage things. And then I'm often encouraging folks that I'm working with to plan several meetings. Like, okay, we're going to do it at this meeting, and the next meeting when we get together, we'll do this chunk, and that will then set us up to do things in the third meeting. And reminding the group, I swear as a network leader, like 90% of your job is to remind the group, here's what we did the last time, here's where we're at right now, here's where we're going. You can never say that enough to any group, but especially in a collaborative setting. Finally, don't plan a meeting without doing this. Know what you're driving at. What are your outcomes? What do you want to accomplish? Then plan the meeting. And again, I'm seeing a lot of people smiling. But this is one of those basics that's really hard to do because it takes more time. It's often best done with a team. And I'm going to leave you at that because we've got a session 2 coming up, and we're going to dive in a little deeper on many of the things that we've touched on today. So we're going to skip that one, and we're going to skip that Menti, and I'm going to tell you what's next. We're coming to the close here of session 1. So what you can expect is we're going to build on these outcomes. We did all of these pieces in a way that I hope is supportive of you as an individual, really thinking about what's my role, what do I bring, how do I support the group, and then getting your pair of glasses on to kind of really get up above your collaboration and look at it in a little different way. That's called leadership on the balcony, and it's one of those, you can't, again, as a leader, you can't do that enough. Like you're in it, you're in it, you're in it. You need to get up, and I hope the 3 critical tensions hope to do that. 6 tips are a way to help your meetings be better. And then the last chunk was just reminding you that meetings are part of an arc of work, and that the group and the leadership of the group need to kind of hold that arc. Session 2, we're going to dive in and focus on supporting decision-making and processes that lead to decision-making well. We're also going to just illustrate opening and closing well again. I hope everything we're doing you see as a model, perhaps to borrow from, steal from. It's the highest compliment you can give us. So I think with that, I want to tell you there's one more assignment. Brenna is going to be sharing with you a hard copy worksheet that I invite you to either do on screen or print out and work on it. Plan to take about 10 minutes with it. It's a tool that will help you analyze your current meetings and come ready to talk about your current meetings in the first exercise that we do when we gather again in session 2. So I hope you can do that. You'll have a richer conversation. If not, you can play it by ear. I know you all are really busy people, but we're hopeful that this kind of prep will make next session even more productive. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Diana Toledo.
All right, thank you, Diane. Just real briefly to remind you that when you registered for this first session, you're also registered automatically for the second. But I think Brenna, correct me if I'm wrong, but she's going to send a calendar invitation to make sure that you all have it on your calendar with the Zoom. It sounds like some folks had lost the Zoom link between registration and today. There's also a second session that is coming up between now and then that I want to make sure you're aware of, Trash to Action. It's a separate webinar that River Network is sponsoring, and the registration page is right there if that's a topic you're interested in. And also remind you that River Rally is coming up. Registration is open, and this is where our Urban Waters Learning Network comes together in person once a year. So it's been actually now 3 years since we've done it in person. So hopefully you're all seeing the news about that, but you can otherwise learn about it at riverrally.org. So nothing else to add other than to thank you. Thank you, Diane, for leading us through this session. And thank you all for bringing your energy and your contributions to it, both in a large group and a small group. So see you all in a couple of weeks. Brenda, anything else to add?
Nope, I've just been sharing everything in the chat. So links, PDFs, Mentimeters, worksheets, calendar invites will all be coming from me. So I am not spamming your inbox. I will just be sharing a lot of information with you.
All right. And thank you, Brenna, for all your work on this. Everybody have a great rest of your afternoon. We'll see you shortly. Collaboration. and we are recording this session. If you were here and if you were not here during the first session 2 weeks ago, we are going to publish the recordings for both sessions together here in the next couple of days. So that'll give you a chance to catch up if you weren't here then. But glad to see that some new faces have joined here for the second session. I'm going to go ahead and kick us off just with introductions as we wait for some other folks to join. So again, my name is Diana Toledo. I work with River Network. I'm a program director with the organization, and I'm joined by my colleague Brenna Goggin, who you've been hearing about with all logistical issues related to this session. So welcome. Again, session 2 on facilitating collaboration series, creating momentum. We had a great session 2 weeks ago. We are so looking forward to building on that with Diane's leadership. And this session is sponsored by the Urban Waters Learning Network. And so if you are not familiar with the Urban Waters Learning Network, this is a peer-to-peer network of individuals and organizations that are really doing work around urban waterways, both to revitalize and restore the waterways and the communities around them. This is a network that is facilitated by River Network and Groundwork USA and funded with support from the EPA. So if this is new to you, please take a look. I just chatted the link to our website. We would love to welcome you to other conversations and trainings from that network. So yeah, I appreciate you joining. So today we are joined and led by Diane Russell again, who is the president of the Institute for Conservation Leadership, an incredible organization, an incredible partner to River Network over many, many years. ICL, as their shorthand name is 30-some-year-old organization, and they have built a solid and long reputation of supporting leaders, organizations, coalitions, and networks across the conservation space, across the country. And so we know that many of our member groups have tapped into ICL's expertise. They have been to River Rally many a time leading workshops, and they're just a fantastic resource. Please check them out online. I'll drop their link as well into the chat, but they are great thought leaders and facilitators and supporters of the conservation leaders in our network. So great to have you with us again, Diane. Welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Diana. That was such a lovely introduction. I appreciate you, and I appreciate our partnership with River Network. And I appreciate everybody who's here for this session. I am really excited to step with you into session 2, which is going to be focused on creating momentum in our collaborations and how can we as leaders help make that happen. And in the last session, if you were with us and if you weren't, we shared the 6 tips for productive virtual meetings. And one of the tips is to create connections early, and that is also connected to opening well. And I would invite you now in chat to try out this opening question. We call it the weather report. It's a good way to get a sense of like, where's this group at? How are they doing? But to do it in a very shorthand way. You can do it as a go round if it's a smaller group. But for today, we're going to drop in chat a couple of words that you might hear on a weather report that describe how you are doing right now. Blustery. I love the opening one. That's fantastic. People tend to have fun with this, but it also tells you quite a bit. Overcast, we have some sunny with flooding. That's fascinating. It can happen that way. Swirling systems with clearing skies. Sunny and strong winds. I love the juxtaposition of how it can be one way and both. Rumbling storms, warm and sunny, doldrummy. Several partly sunnies, strong winds. Gray, yeah. Sunny and freezing, yeah, that would be early March in much of the world, in the northern climes anyway. It depends on where you're coming in from. Sunny winter day. Yes, the sun is trying to come out from the clouds. Yes. Okay, great. So you get a flavor for this. It is a chance. I really believe that it's important to get everyone's voice in the room early on, especially if you want it to be an engaging meeting. And I do feel like that kind of engagement is part of what we encourage in order to make meetings fun as well as productive, and it's part of opening well. So my question to you in chat is this next one. Now that we've opened, I'm curious, and you'll get this will be crowdsourced, but we're gonna collect this and send it out to you in chat. Add your examples of other questions and icebreakers that you like to use. Yeah, we both got that dropped in there. Thank you, Brenna. Good. Any good questions that you've used for getting people's voice in the room, hearing from people? Ooh, favorite native plants and why? This is going to be good. And I know we've got enough people here with 40 some that I'm not going to keep up. Bright spots. Bright spots or concerns. And you know, the interesting thing is you can do that for work, or you could do that for your own life. It depends on where you want to go with the group and how you want to help guide people along. When are you going outside? That's a great question for the pandemic. Trivia questions. My colleague Joy Jackson, if any of you have worked with her, she loves to do this or that and have people vote or opine upon one or the other. I think that's really sweet in terms of, yes, cats or dogs is a great example of that. That's a usually very lively conversation. Favorite 80s movie? That's terrific. Were there any good movies in the 80s? I don't know. Personal theme songs. I'm a baseball fan, so I'm really big on walk-up songs. How do you prefer your potatoes? Love that. Yeah, love questions about travel, favorite place to go, favorite things to do with days off, like taking people out of the day-to-day stuff is really fun. Favorite place to play as a kid, very sweet. Something that makes you worried or hopeful. I like both of those questions. I probably tend too much to ask the hopeful, but given the headlines, it's one of my ways of coping. Favorite vacation, new words. Rose and thorns. I like that one. That's a good image. If you were a tree, I like that one too. This is fantastic. I'm happy. I'm going to get all of these things and be able to share them with my ICL colleagues. Yeah, and all the Deanna Toledos need to rename yourself. There's something funky happening with Zoom today that everybody came in. You know, we are all wannabes. Like, we all want to be like Deanna. So I get it. I know Zoom understands that, but great. What did you read or listen to? I like that question because I'm not a big reader, and I always appreciate it in terms of inclusivity, that people don't just talk about books all the time. So I like that. Something for fun. These are all fantastic. These are all really fantastic. Okay, terrific. So that's a good example of another way to do icebreakers. Actually, this morning, my colleague Joy asked us, what's your least favorite icebreaker that you've ever been asked to do? that produced some eye rolls and some other things. So, well, just to orient you to where we're headed in this session today, for those that have been on the full journey or that prepped for this and are just joining today, we did do the orientation video, and last session, we really talked about collaborative tensions and ways to make our meetings work more productively. And today we're going to step through a little bit more about meetings. I'm sneaking in some stuff that I hope will be helpful to you, but we're really going to spend the bulk of our time on how to support your decision making, which is one of the critical things. If we're going to have a good, strong collaboration, we need to be sure to be able to make decisions well, know when we've made a decision, be in concert with each other, and move forward with energy and momentum. And so to do that today, this is the other thing I really want you to be thinking of in the back of your mind. We have 2 sessions together. This is the second one. One of the things that we really like to encourage you to do is not just have a good learning experience, but really think about, what am I going to do differently? What's my little mini plan for incorporating some of the pieces that I've picked up from my peers or from the content that's going to be shared? And River Network will be sending out additional resources following this as well. But start now thinking about the question I'm going to ask you at the end, which is, what might you do in the next couple months based on what you've learned? Today, we are going to step back through a small exercise we asked you to do in preparation for this session on analyzing our meetings and what we learned from kind of stepping back and looking at how we use the time in our meetings. We're also going to talk about and give you another pair of glasses, like, something to kind of look at what's happening when you're in a decision-making process. And I'm really excited to share it with you. When I learned it, it really shifted the way I was able to lead as well as facilitate. And so I'm psyched to share that with you, but I also want to be able to support you in moving things toward decisions. And so we're going to also share 5 different ways to support your decision making in a virtual or in a in-person context. And then we're going to give you a chance to frame up some of your next steps and think about what your action plan is going to be. All right. We are going to drop the link just in case you missed it, because we are hoping that you've come to this conversation ready, having completed this worksheet, so that you're ready to just think about it with a couple other folks and what you learned and what your takeaways were from it. So we'll drop the link, and it's there in case you need it for reference. But in just a moment, we're going to put you in breakout groups of about 3. And the 2 questions are pretty easy. What did you learn from completing the worksheet? And then, are there any changes that you're contemplating or thinking about because of what you learned from doing the analysis? And I'm going to drop those 2 questions in chat so that you have them and have them to take them with you when you get into your breakout. Just have fun with the conversation. Be sure to do a quick round of introductions so you get to know each other just a tad before you launch. So, how are we doing, Brenna?
Good. Any questions before we launch you? All right, enjoy.
Wait for the full complement of folks to come in. Hope you had good conversations with everybody. And met some new people. Oh, got a thumbs up there. Thank you. It's always good to have a little feedback. Well, welcome back. Always like to see those smiles. Folks are coming back from having a chance to engage with their peers. I know it can be intimidating for many people to like just pop into a room with people you don't know. So thanks for rolling with us on that. All right. So it looks like we're back. And my question to you, and I'll step you through how we're going to gather this, but my question is, were there certain themes that you heard as the three of you or two of you talked about looking at your meetings and the sheet that we gave you to analyze? And so to do that, we're going to use a tool that's called Mentimeter. And there are three ways that you can get to Mentimeter to participate in this. So the first is any browser, whether it's on your phone or a tablet or your laptop, and then type in those 8 digits when you get to that point in the browser. If you have a phone, we're going to be using Mentimeter a couple times today. I always like just pointing it at the QR code that's on the screen, and that will take you directly to Mentimeter. And then in chat is a link that you can collect, and that'll take you to Mentimeter on your computer. So now we go live to Mentimeter. And real time, we're going to see this. I think sometimes when folks see ICL use Mentimeter, they're like, oh, I could use that in my meeting. And I do want to encourage you to do that. It's fantastic for larger groups like this, especially. You could ask this same question in chat and you would get a lot of good stuff. But it's so hard if you're trying to theme or look for patterns. And as you can see, when it comes in on Mentimeter, it's going to come in 3 different columns. It's easy to start to scan and see things. And if there's something that you want to highlight as the facilitator or the guide for the meeting, you can click on it and it pops up so that you can use that as a talking point. And that's what I want to do with this one. It's fascinating to me. And I would say the bottom line for most collaborations and whether they work or not is this first word. It's really all about how much trust. And different partnerships and collaborations have different flavors of that. But you can see that's an emerging theme here. At least I'd like to see it as an emerging theme. I got 2, that's enough. Seeing a lot about how we use our time constraints, it's a challenge to find times to try the new methods, feel you on that, know you on that. That is so true. I think it takes more time to prepare for online meetings, especially. It's kind of like a 3-to-1 ratio when I'm thinking about it. The default does tend to be the sharing or reporting. So then the question is, how can we get some of that done ahead of time or do some work ahead of time so that when we get to the meeting, we can use it in a more interactive or productive way. Too much information sharing, that seems. I really appreciate this one. Meeting structures can change over time as the collaboration matures. And meeting structures, like we're going to talk at the end about how to keep getting constant feedback about what's working for people. But I just sort of treat it as a big social science experiment. Like we do it one way right now, but like, can we get some feedback? Let's adapt it. Let's change it. Let's use it in a way. And I really appreciate this comment too, that there is a different vibe sometimes when you're in a meeting versus you're in a paid team sort of setting. I think that can actually be a real plus for collaboration. We can create a different sort of vibe or culture or feel to what we do together because we're not wed to any one of the organizations that's part of the collaboration. More about trust, providing input, desire to scale back reporting, how to minute the length of the report outs. Yes, we've got a certain time here. How do we do that? In person, we used to hand around a watch. so that no one person had to play timekeeper, but you just set the timer. I like timers a lot in terms of the timer becomes a cutoff rather than me. Sharing things in advance, I would even like hold out the idea of doing a worksheet before you get to the meeting so that people are ready. Like the example that we just gave you might help. Written updates are great. People won't read them. I'm just being honest. They don't. And so are there things that you can do like a video in advance, like we did before this session, that might make it more lively? Is there a way to truncate it? Is there a way to do it visually? Like trying to be creative with our reports. Volunteers and projects, yes, that is a classic default. This is great. Okay, fantastic. So how we use our meetings is one thing. Again, hearkening back to session 1, I would encourage you to think also about what do we do before we get to the meeting, more planning, I'm sorry. And what do we do at the meeting? And then what are we setting up to do following the meeting? So, all right. Trying to cover a lot of ground today, so I'm going to shift gears on you pretty quickly here. And as I said at the top, I'm very excited to share these tools, and I'm in particularly excited to think about participatory decision making. And my question to you all who are in the middle of leading collaborations and participating in them is, in a collaborative setting, why is participatory decision making so important? And we're going to flip back and gather your thoughts on that question here in Mentimeter. Some of you are working ahead. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. That maybe means I was talking too long in the last one, but that's good. Multitasking, you can follow your own. So how power is shared and who has power to make decisions, I think that's pretty darn core right out of the box. Sense of shared leadership and stewardship of the work moving ahead. You hand me a decision, it's your decision, you're handing it to me, and I don't actually own it. If I participate in making the decision, even if it's like you saying, here's what I'd like you to do, can you do that? Or how would you do that? Or those kinds of things, it makes it something that's owned. Okay. I think some of these might have been for the last question, but that's okay. But it does validate the trust. It can help to build and maintain trust. Buy-in is big. Buy-in is what people are talking about here. I want to pull this out. I was a sociology major, and one of the things they told us in small group class was that you actually get a better product with a group than you do with one individual or even a small group of individuals coming up. So the end product is more powerful. I like to think, especially if you've got a diverse set of stakeholders or a diverse set of participants, that it's actually going to be even better and more exciting to implement. And certainly believe in this in terms of participatory decision making. It creates those relationships and long-term powers. This is super critical. If I had more time, I'd spend time on this. But in a collaboration, those that are closest to the work absolutely need to have as much decision making as possible to implement the work because they know it. That's true in general in life, but in a network or an alliance or a collaborative setting, that's really important. And the note here is that sadly in larger institutions, I'm just going to pull all those together there, that's not necessarily how we're wired when we're in a larger institution to think about decisions being closer to the work. But it is something that I think is super fun in a network setting. Okay. So that's why participatory decision-making is important. And I'm going to share with you one of the absolute best resources. If I could go on the road and like sell this book, I would. I turn to it so often. And it's so well laid out. It's easy. It's got lots of pictures. But Sam Kainer and his colleagues have laid out a whole rationale and methodology for participatory decision making. And I really try to respect their work. And so I want to hold it up to you as something very worthy to take a little look at. The piece that I'm going to pull out is in the beginning of the book. Sam and his colleagues lay out this visual that's been so important for me. And you can see it even reflected in the way we created the tips. Like you want to open well, and then you want to close well. And you can think about that. And then there's the work that you do in the middle. And I think like even from designing meetings, that's important. But if you think about decision making as often taking multiple meetings, it might also help you think about how do we open this decision? How do we mess with it? And then how do we close it? And the way they envision that is every time you open a new topic, to get to a really good decision that the group owns, you have to like open things up enough that you understand really where the group is. And that means you have to tolerate divergent thinking, different ways of thinking. I love it in their book. They talk about, and like once you get it open, it can pretty much go anywhere, right? Because we're human and our brains work in a whole variety of different ways. And so as meeting and group, we have to like create some boundaries around where it's going to go. That's a parking lot topic or a bike rack topic. We're going to work with that later. Good thought. And Sam then talks about the closing piece as moving into convergent, like pulling all the pieces together in order to get to a decision point. A couple things happen here in this middle piece. It often feels like people usually get like impatient and frustrated here in the middle. And some of it's because things are going off in different directions. Some of it's like, I just thought my idea was better, so why are we debating other ideas? Like all these things that happen to us as humans. But if you can create enough of a container to keep them bounded and stay in that zone, which I love it. They call it the groan zone, because it is actually where most of the creative and the good stuff happens. There's enough, if you get enough divergence. Now, they also point out that sometimes people don't tolerate it and they close things really quickly. And those are often decisions that don't stick, decisions that don't actually buy people in. Because we didn't open it up and we didn't actually explore it enough to have people feel like they are part of that decision. But in the groan zone, there's conflict sometimes, which can be good if we can lean into it and use it. There can be confusion, like multiple things that don't actually relate to each other. And so there are different ways that we can approach the groan zone in order to move the group to a solid convergence and a decision point. And what I'd like to do is to talk about the values here that Sam and his colleagues, and I would say at ICL, we fully embrace these, but in that groan zone place, what we're really aiming for is making sure everybody's participating, creating a sense of like, let's create mutual understanding. Let's make sure we understand things even if they're different. Coming up with an inclusive solution if you can. Sometimes you can't. But making sure if you can't, that people are comfy with it. and that people own it and are responsible for the decision at the end of the grown zone piece. And so what I'd like to do, I think all of us have lived through this, and all of us have probably been a leader in a meeting where we're in the grown zone. And so in just a minute, we're going to move to a tool called Jamboard to have you be able to add your tools or advice from your lived experience as a leader or a participant in what is helpful when you're in the grown zone. What can help the group have more clarity, understand where it's at, acknowledge what the differences are. And so to do that, we're a big enough group today. We're at 40. Just Jamboard kind of explodes, not literally, but it doesn't function really well with really large groups. So because we have 40, today you're going to join with your birthday mates from January, February, March, and April. We'll click on this link when it's dropped. May, June, July, August, we'll do that one. And the folk that were born at the end of the year will do the final one. And I'll be monitoring all of the Jamboards. I have them all up here. And if you haven't used Jamboard, and if you use Jamboard as a facilitator, I want to encourage you to always explain it, because somebody in the group probably hasn't used it. We're just using one page today, but if it's a multi-page Jamboard, it has navigation up here at the top. But the easiest way is to use the sticky note, which is over here right below the arrow. It pops up. You got lots of colors you can choose from. You click on it and type. You hit save. Jamboard almost always pops up in this corner, and so then you're going to need to grab it and move it around. As you're working with your 15 to 20 folks or so, you can kind of start to build on each other's ideas and move things around that relate to each other. I just love Jamboard in terms of like creating a space for dialogue, especially for those of us who think to talk. So I think at this point, we're going to drop the link that I showed you before. I think it's already there. It looks like folks are in group 1, group 2, group 3. Everybody's there. I'm gonna stop sharing for now so we can see things. And just let you do some work, and then I'll probably let you work for a couple minutes, and then we'll maybe tour the Jamboards together to just get a flavor for it. The other cool thing with Jamboard is we will print these out and put them in PDFs for you to be able to have to take all the great ideas about how to work with the grown zone when we're in it in the decision-making process. Fantastic. Doing things before you get to the meeting, if you can get your group to do it, it's going to take a lot of reminders, a lot of encouragement, and then eventually peer pressure kind of sets in and people know, oh, I actually have to do this because we're going to start the conversation there. I also really believe in creating something, but then giving it to a small group that has flavor. I don't like to even say representativeness, but like flavor of your collaboration that is part of that small group, to take it and work it and bring it back with 1 or 2 or 3 different observations or options or other things to help move the whole group into the next phase of thinking. So this is terrific. So I think one of the things that I will do is just kind of look over what each of the 3 groups came up with, and I'll share with River Network kind of my high takeaways of what you have generated and what some of the themes are that are there. And just for time's sake, I am going to take you to one of the things that we promised, which is how do you move from, we've got all these ideas down to actually making a decision that's owned, that people can think about. And one of the tools that I want to share with you is based on some of my observation, and especially in the United States, where we're taught to think pro and con. We're taught to think either or. We're taught to say yay or nay. And I think all of that does help you get to a decision point, but it's not always the best way, especially if you're looking for everyone to participate. And one of the tools that's just supercharged, I think, for helping to converge the thinking and get to a decision point is what we think of as gradients of agreement. And it literally is that. Like, rarely are things a binary, right? In so many things in life. And so if we can start to suss out and understand where the group's at, do they strongly support it? Do they support it some, but they've got a little bit of question? Are they really on the fence? Or do they really don't think it because they've got a giant reservation? Or they just really hate it? They really dislike it. And so what I want to just give you a quick tour of is 5 different ways that you could use gradients of agreement in helping to understand where the group is at. And I'll tell you, I've used this a couple times. The classic in Robert's rules is motion concept is put on the table, and then there's discussion, and then you have an up or down vote, right? And so sometimes I will flip it and do, here's a concept, let's test and see where the group is at, and then let's discuss it. Because it could be that you don't actually have anything to discuss. But if you open it up for discussion, people are going to discuss. So the 5 options are just a play on this, but it also includes ways to do it quickly, either in person or online. I think most of these translate to both. So the first is kind of classic thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. And that can cut through a lot of stuff so fast. Anyone who's thumbs sideways gets a chance to talk about it first. You start there, and then you see where you're at in terms of total numbers. And then you can play with it. Like if somebody's thumbs down and they went like this on the screen or in the meeting, you can see then you maybe want to invite a chance for people to talk about it too. So that's option 1. That's a quickie. 5 to 5 is another way to do it. It really follows those 5 gradients. It gives people more options. But what I have here on the screen is like the surprise element. Like on the count of 5, everybody's just going to show where they're at with it. So this is something you can use if it's not a super hot topic. Like if it's really hot, someone mentioned on one of the things like anonymity is often our friend if it's a really hot topic. But it's just like, where are you at? 1, 2, 3, go. And people, will put their numbers up. You can see it if people are on screen, on Zoom. I guess you can do thumbs up, thumbs down, but there's no sideways on Zoom. But anyways, like you can figure out ways to get these to translate in an online thing. And then again, with gradients of agreement, you've got a way to kind of look at it and hopefully discuss it and use that as feedback. Zoom has a pretty robust polling feature. You can set these up ahead of time in Zoom so you're not fumbling around trying to do it in the meeting. I did it once in Zoom and everybody was in support, and then we had like 20 extra minutes because I thought we were going to have to discuss it and other things. So again, it can be a way to kind of truncate the conversation or just flesh things out and know what you have to talk about or not. You can use Jamboard also to have people vote. put a check mark on Jamboard in terms of where you're at, and then put sticky notes up below that about why you are there. Jamboard can be really flexible, and I want to do a shout out to our colleague Brad Webb, who came up with this. This is one of, this is like a gradient of agreement that's actually written specifically for collaborations. So in a collaboration, people can like it, but what you really want are folks that love it enough to actually lead it. Like, I'd be willing, this is so cool, I'm willing to step up and own it, be in a small group, take a leadership role on it, etc. And so I like it. And also you need to know if it's a big decision, if it's so big, would people actually leave the collaboration over it? Or would they let go and step back because they were so disappointed that the partnership or the network did it? And generally what Brad says, if you got people in the like and love, that's good enough. That's one of his, it's actually one of my phrases. Like, is it good enough? Like, can we live with this? Is it good enough for us as a collaboration to try something with this? The final one is a little more complicated, but sit with me on this. This was literally from a process that we did where we were trying to get finalization on a statement of purpose for a new collaboration. And this one was a sticking point in the conversation. We pulled it out and we said, tell us where you're at, put an X in the box. But then most importantly, tell us why you like it, if you like it, and why you don't support including it. And this was a Google Doc. We used it in the meeting. I think I actually set it up so that we had pairs talk about it while they were rating, so that if people needed some think time in a smaller setting, they could get that rather than having to do it in a full group. The other question I really like to ask people in the below box is, what would move you higher in the gradients of agreement? Like, what would move you from you could go either way to support or strongly support? And what that does is it gives them the ownership for coming up with something, as opposed to just saying, I could go either way, but then it's the responsibility of the group to figure it out. You know, I really like the idea of like, okay, you could go either way. What would move you to be really enthusiastic about this? And really give them the responsibility for articulating what is it that would move them in the discussion. And I would say I've done this with groups as large as 100. You need a certain kind of tool to do that. You need to be really creative, but you could use Mentimeter also. I didn't mention that, but that's another way to both get a reading on it and then also get feedback verbally that a group could work with. So those are my 5 options for the gradients of agreement. And part of why I'm so passionate about not making it a binary is that I think you get better discussions, but most importantly, I think the gradients of agreement really embody these values that we're aiming for in participatory decision, where you get decisions that will stick, where you get decisions where people will lead and you're not trying to convince people to join you. And so that's my little thing on participatory decision making. I think one of the things that is important in participatory decision making is, again, taking the time, having enough time to really make it a participatory decision. In this example about trying to come up with a purpose statement, that is grounding, that is important. We took like 5 meetings to get it to a final place. And again, we were working with a larger group of about 80 in a founding group. So, okay. I told you we were going to move fast today, and I wanted to be sure to have enough time to step through this. And so you're like, wait, we've got another 30 minutes. Why are we closing? It's a good question. But what I'd like to do is to just emphasize what I talked about in the 6 tips, which is opening well is important, but closing well in terms of maintaining momentum and moving forward is equally important, and we often forget about it. One thing to do in closing, I think, is to just remind people where we're at and that we did this. So I'm using this as a way to help you start to frame up your next steps in our outcomes. And there's 2 concepts I want to share with you, and I'm going to try to illustrate, and you're also going to participate in closing. The first concept in trying to close a meeting well and help the group maintain momentum is to both summarize and anchor the group for its next piece of work. And many of you on the Jamboards today cited that kind of summarizing as a key piece of like where are we at in the grown zone. And the same is important for where we're at in the work that we're doing as it has a life. And so sometimes that's the leader summarizing, sometimes it's getting the group to summarize and pull together a collective sense of what did we just live through and what are we doing? And then what are we going to be doing next? Like what's ahead? I think I said it in the last session, but you can never do enough of here's where we were, here's where we are, here's where we're going. And, you know, just think of yourself as somebody who's leading a hike or a canoe trip or something. Like if you're orienting people who are doing an experience together, that's just a human need, and the leader can do it or others in the group can do it as well. And then in summarizing it, it helps people take leadership as well as adapt what they're doing if you can summarize and anchor what just happened well. So here are 5 possible closing questions. I'm really big on opening well and getting everybody's voice in the room. You don't always have time to do it, but I do think closing well and getting everybody's voice in the room before you exit back to your lives and your work can be helpful. And so any of these 5 questions fit in that bucket of summarizing and orienting and getting people to articulate what they're going to do next. I think in the vein of maintaining momentum, one of the things is that action step and people owning what they're going to do next. Sometimes that's documenting it, like putting it up so everybody can see it, but also knowing who's going to be the one that's following up. Because that follow-up is the thing that, I don't know about y'all, but I'm a pretty busy, and my little tiny brain can't remember from the last meeting, and I intend to do well, but I don't always follow through, and I actually appreciate people reminding me because of that. This last question, 5, what are you more aware about our work? I think sometimes that gets buried, but that is a classic question to ask a group that helps the group's thinking and work continue to evolve. And in our current climate where things are changing so quickly, that kind of adaptive posture is one that I think is good to encourage. So what we'd like to do is actually do this. This is another thing that I think if you don't have a lot of time, you can break into partner conversations really quickly and have people process the question. So this is our question for today. What from today's session do you think you're going to use most? And we're just going to do this really fast, about 5 minutes. And then we'll come back and actually, I don't think we're gathering this, but you can also like have people talk, come back and gather it and see what we have to say. But for this one, it's just you and your partner, and you have a chance to just process what you're going to use most.
This meeting is being recorded.
We are back to being recorded, and we're back in the full group. We have half a moment, and I just kind of want to go back and say, invite anybody in chat to add a great closing question that you like to use as well. And again, we'll package this up and share as well. But I hope that question was fruitful. I really do like to ask people that question, because the truth is, for us as humans, if we either write it down or say it, we're like 5 times more likely to accomplish what we just said. In adult learning, it's called publishing. If we write or say something, we're also more likely to remember it. So I hope that time was productive and you got a chance to get to know a few more folks as well. And in chat, any ideas about questions or ways that you like to close meetings? So the second concept that I want to step you through is a concept of the group and you as the leader getting feedback. And it could be feedback about the meeting. It could be feedback about where the group's at. It could be feedback about our current strategy. Honestly, sometimes we just need to talk about what we're seeing or hearing or feeling in our communities or in the world that may actually help us build strategies that connect with our communities. So this concept of collective ownership, but also collective awareness, is what I'm trying to encourage. And I think, like, sometimes I leave a meeting and I think, what just happened? What was going on? Why was everybody so quiet? Why were we in that messy middle in the groan zone for so long? Like, what was it? And at the bottom of this concept is, as a leader, I hate guessing. And I hate having the responsibility of not knowing. And so, because then it's my job, right? As opposed to the group's job, the group's awareness, the group's ownership of it. So like, this is so easy. This is on a Jamboard, but I can't tell you the number of times I've done this on a flip chart. And you can use stickies in person. If you don't have a lot of time, you can also talk people through. But like the classic question of what worked well, and then just framing what might we change as opposed to what stunk or what was horrible or what was bad. This kind of framing actually helps us as humans to join in, and it also frames things in a way that the group can work with it. It allows people to look for change, but to not just pass judgment, to move on. Another version of it that I like is I appreciated, and I wonder if we might. And again, that language is intentional, and it's really focused on getting people to name what is working, what they appreciate. In a collaborative setting, we don't have time to go into it, but one of the things you have to pay attention to is what are people giving and what are people getting? And asking the appreciation question is a helpful way to understand what they're getting, what they're appreciating, what is of value. And that can be everything from the group, and people can be called out to what we did in the meeting. You can frame these two things. And I wonder if we might is a great way to not say we should or we have to, but it is a great way in generative thinking to just open up what the possibilities might be out there, which underscores one of the things in a collaborative setting that we always need to be thinking about is we don't need to have the right answer or a final right decision. Like, sometimes decisions are hard. because we think we have to have the answer. And I really encourage leaders and groups to think about having an answer that's good enough that we can experiment with. Underscore experiment. We're going to try this. We're going to treat it like an experiment in the collaboration. And then we're going to pause the experiment and take some measurements. How is this working? Is this serving what we thought it would? How might we change it in the future? So really simple questions, but again, creating enough time and buffer to ask those questions and get the feedback is important. And so I'm going to also show you another way in Mentimeter to get some feedback and different kinds of feedback. So bop over to Mentimeter and queue up the next question. I really like having outcomes for meetings. Y'all heard me say that in meeting 1. What is it that we're trying to do in this precious space of time that we have together? So I'm curious, how did we do in reaching the outcomes that I articulated for the day? And if you go to Mentimeter, this is another example of a gradient of agreement. I strongly agree, I strongly disagree. You're going to be able to tell me in the middle here, like where we're at. And, you know, I think getting to the outcome for the meeting is a really critical piece. And it is part of building momentum. Like I work with some groups that they're so tangible. It's like I'll literally go to the outcomes and say, okay, check, we did this, we did this, we did this. That helps create a sense of momentum. Like, oh, okay, we did something. We didn't just gather and chat. So, okay, I'll let these come in a little bit more. Still got folks voting. To me, this is, in terms of feedback, this is really important to have as a leader and important for you to be able to see real time as opposed to waiting until after the meeting. So a second form of closure, and we talked a little bit about it in the first concept. I think you'll still be able to vote for that if you're still waiting to cast your vote on Mentimeter. The last question is I did want to gather up from these 2 sessions that we've had, as you move forward and facilitate and lead collaborations, I'm curious what you want to focus on. And it could be an action, or it could just be building out an awareness that you've gained from these 2 sessions. It could be building a relationship that you hadn't really thought about. It could be, you know, like, I don't know, something that makes you happy. I don't really care, but please add your comments in Mentimeter, and we'll see what comes in from the full group. These are great. They're kind of all over the place too, and I appreciate that. I appreciate, or I hope that we've offered a range of things with these 2 sessions that would land for the unique partnership or alliance or collaboration that you have. Yeah, icebreakers don't need to just be at the beginning of the meeting. Sometimes like in the middle is a good switch. Or when you go to breakout groups, encouraging people to do a quick icebreaker. Circle curiosity here. That is of service to us. We can help the group and ourselves stay in a curious place. Feedback systems. Great. Yeah, don't forget the closing. A couple of you have named this the preparation. I think preparing for meetings or for a series of meetings or a decision-making process, I always believe it happens better when it's not done alone. And it's more fun to create a small group that's thinking about the meeting, or even just a thinking partner that can help you put it out. But that time to prepare and articulate what we're trying to do here. Never have enough fun, especially in a collaborative setting. A funder one time asked me, like, how do you know if a collaboration is working or not? Like, what's your metric? Like, funders are all about metrics. Yeah, some of you are funders, I know, but metrics are good. And I said, well, my metric is often how much laughter is there? Because laughter is a great indication that there's comfort and trust and a shared sense about things. So this is, I love this, how to use lead, love, like to help form committees. Or get rid of committees. Get rid of working groups. Like, honestly, in a collaboration, if there's not enough energy to make it go, it probably doesn't need to go. You can just like let it go and focus where there is energy, because in a collaborative setting, energy is really what drives things. And you can't manufacture it. And that it has to come from what people are interested in and what they're going to get from it and how it's going to be valued over time. So yeah, I really like that one. More prep, icebreakers, asking, clarity through asking questions and using new tools, ensuring. So let me just tell you a secret for somebody who does a lot of facilitating me. I usually rewrite the questions that I'm asking the group to discuss 2 or 3 times, sometimes 4 or 5 times. My best questions have always come in working with colleagues to sharpen that question. And the question is often hooked to what is it that we're trying to do? And they kind of toggle back and forth, like, okay, if we're trying to do that, do we ask the question this way? Or if we ask the question this way, would it actually take us in a different direction? Oh, that's good. Let's go there with our outcomes instead. That's even better. So asking a question is really kind of, I don't know, I find it's like an art form, and you never get perfect at it, but asking questions in the middle of a discussion is also a really important thing. And the piece that I always go back to is, what am I intending to do with this question? What's my intention in asking that question? And then pay attention if you're asking, like inadvertently, we do it, right? A binary question. You want to generally ask questions that are opening, which means it's not a yes or no. It's not a this answer or that answer. So yeah, final thoughts on that. Okay, great stuff from this group. I wish we had more time, but we don't. And so I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Deanna, to close us out well.
All right. Oh, the pressure's on. Close us out well, which is my own goal going forward. Thank you, Diane. This was great. Even for somebody who is thinking about this stuff a lot and maybe has even that handbook, a lot of great reminders of how to do this well. Fantastic. I do want to encourage everybody, if to get support for putting into action what's next for you. And so there's a few ways to do that. If you are one of the federal partnership locations, I would encourage, if this is something that you want to connect with your peers on, to let's use that monthly call to put this on the agenda, to check in with one another about how things are going, putting some of these practices into play. If you're not one of the federal partnership locations, I invite you to join the Learning Network in our online channel, Mobilize. I put the link in the chat. and connect with one another there. But if you're not interested in the Urban Waters Learning Network because it's not the kind of work that you're doing, but you're working with a different kind of collaborative, I just want to lend our support, Brenna and myself. If you have questions, if you want a thinking partner as you're approaching your next collaborative meeting, please reach out, and we'd love to work with you to put some of this into play. So with that, just to close us up real quick, a couple of other meetings coming up, trainings that might be of interest. One is coming up tomorrow, and a couple of webinars on SRF administration. If you're doing urban waters work, you know about the state revolving fund and all the dollars coming into play in our communities. So those are a couple of sessions to learn how to navigate those investments. And finally, just ask you to please, if you would, give us some feedback. The evaluation link should be dropping into the chat here. And also to remind you that you have until middle of this month, the 15th, to apply for a scholarship. This is attending River Rally is our opportunity to come together in person and connect with one another around these kinds of issues and many others. So I invite you to consider joining us at Rally in Washington, D.C. coming up in June, but March 15th is the deadline for applying for a scholarship. So if you're interested or intrigued, take a look at that link below, riverrally.org. You can learn more about it there. I think that is it. Thank you again to Diane from ICL. Again, take a look at icl.org for a lot of the resources that they have. And thank you to Brenna for all of the back-end work, getting everybody to this space today and a couple of weeks ago. So really appreciate all of Brenna's hard work. So without further ado, have a great rest of your day, everybody, and definitely reach out. We'd love to hear more from you, whether at the Learning Network forum or in person via email. Thanks, everybody.